Good day to everyone who's tuned in for the conference, and thanks to the conference organizers from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to um, invite me to present at this online conference, which is also novel for me. I'll be giving you a short presentation about policies and measures for REDD+ results-based actions. So basically, for countries who are completing the REDD+ readiness, the preparatory phase, how can you go about implementing REDD+ at a national level? So basically the topics that I'll cover is, first of all, to understand that quite a few countries are following a deterministic path, where deforestation basically increases as countries develop economically. But that is, of course, the type of curve that we want to circumvent. Then I'll focus on a number of direct and indirect drivers of deforestation. I think especially the direct drivers may be known to many of you, but some of the indirect drivers may not be. Then a short explanation about a potential way for countries to rank or to prioritize what types of policies and measures they want to implement for their own, in their own country, and a concluding section as well. So these graphs were featured in The Economist magazine a few months ago, with a question mark whether countries would indeed follow such a deterministic path as they develop economically. In other words, do they start from a position where at the lower end of the economic development ladder there's still a lot of tropical forest, but as they develop economically, the rate of deforestation progressively increases until at some stage, due to a number of reasons, that rate of deforestation slows down. That is, of course, given the enormous loss of tropical forest over the past decades, not something we want to continue, ideally. And I think Brazil has shown, at least for a period of time, that it's possible. Its deforestation levels were reduced from 27,000 square kilometers in 2000 to around 5,000 square kilometers in 2011. So that's a major decrease on annual deforestation rates, even though in 2008 and 2013 deforestation levels increased. It basically amounted to about 62,000 square kilometers avoided loss of tropical forest in the Amazon basin, which is equivalent to around 2.3 billion tons of CO2. Which, if you want to compare that with the amount of CO2 emitted by coal-fired power plants, that is equivalent to 131 coal-fired power plants emitting greenhouse gas emissions over a period of 5 years. And the paper where I took this from, the CPI paper, they valued the avoided loss at around 11.5 billion. What is important to realize is that on the one hand, the government of Brazil took decisive action through an action plan for prevention and control of deforestation in the legal Amazon, better cooperation at federal, state, municipal level, stricter and better monitoring. There were 2 presidential decrees and also crucially a central bank resolution that was prohibiting the issuance of loans to farmers who do not comply with environmental regulation, which led to reduced availability of credit in rural areas of around 1.4 billion, which was attributed to a decrease in deforestation of around 15%. At the same time, also the market was playing an important role. Falling agricultural prices basically meant that there was a reduced pressure to increase deforestation or to maintain deforestation at the same levels. So basically this is about trying to bend the curve that would make countries not follow the same line as we see on this graph on the left, but really to decouple deforestation from economic growth. Right, quickly moving to a number of direct and indirect drivers of deforestation, and also what are the means to tackle these. At the heart of it is the current lack of a price or value on forest carbon, which is necessary to counter deforestation and forest degradation. Around it, there are a number of, you can call it enabling factors or potential policies and measures that in many cases are not being carried out in many countries, due to which there is still a high level of deforestation. You can think about fiscal and trade policies that now incentivize or increase pressure on forest, the lack of investment in forest landscape restoration, the need and the current lack to incorporate the value of forest and natural assets on corporate balance sheets and national accounts. The pledge, but the current lack of corporations, especially in the agricultural supply chain, to strip deforestation from productive and also financial supply chains. Financial supply chains, what I mean with that is banks, fund managers, and insurance companies providing debt, equity, or insurance, and the need to tie that to conditions to reduce net deforestation. If you would flip that around, those reasons why forests continue to disappear can actually be changed. And last but not least, even though there is a limited amount of influence we can exercise on these, sovereign debt levels, prices of agricultural commodities, fossil fuel prices, currency exchange rates between forest-rich nations and the major trading partners are all potential factors that could exacerbate or reduce the pressure on deforestation and forest degradation. So what are some ways to try to counter this? REDD+ has the potential to be an interesting means for countries to reduce deforestation. One way to look at it is to set aside forests through moratoria, through laws and regulations. This can be an interesting means. It could also be quite costly, because you have to look at the opportunity cost, the transaction cost, and the implementation cost of REDD+, compared to alternative forms of land use. There are of course also other types of what I would call policies and measures to counter deforestation. And what you see in the graph here is just a schematic and only for illustrative purposes graph that could perhaps be beneficial for countries seeking to implement REDD+ and simply want to know how should I go about this. And one way to do it is to look at, if I would implement a certain measure, such as try and tackle illegal deforestation, how much would it cost me, and what is the abatement potential? What is the potential to have a certain amount of avoided loss of forest carbon emissions? And through that you can perhaps compile what I would call a REDD+ cost curve, or REDD+ cost curve for results-based actions. While looking at carbon is important to be eligible for results-based payments, the ability for countries to get results-based payments or finance for reducing deforestation, forest degradation rates compared to a baseline of forest reference emission level or forest reference level. At the same time, it may also be interesting for countries to look at other non-carbon benefits, such as biodiversity, water, livelihoods, etc. These are a number of potential policies and measures outlined. National natural capital accounting and valuation can be helpful to inform governments about the economic value of forest ecosystems for the national economy. It could, for example, lead to a higher budget for ministries of environment or forestry if there's an acknowledgement within the cabinet that the contribution of forest ecosystems is perhaps to gross domestic product is perhaps higher than previously thought. The importance of calculating value at risk for companies that are active in the agricultural supply chain, and see how reducing deforestation or net deforestation and forest degradation can actually lead to a reduced material risk for companies. Fiscal and trade policies can be very powerful if implemented correctly. Conservation policies, such as implemented by Brazil to increase protection of tropical forest through direct enforcement, working with financial regulators such as the central bank in Brazil, could also be an important measure. And forest landscape restoration, so for countries who want to prioritize, say, the plus in REDD+, increased enhancement of forest carbon stocks, it's important to see how can investments in forest landscape restoration contribute to REDD+ and lead to potential results-based payments. And last but not least, the increase of the supply of timber and stimulating sustainable forest management, incentivized through laws and regulations. Think of FLEGT, for example, to enhance the legal supply of timber. Can also reduce impacts on forests. In each of these cases, of course, it's crucial to link the potential implementation of a certain policy and measure to the perceived effectiveness of it, and then, of course, to have it tracked at a national level. So just to reiterate the main points of this short presentation, it may not be easy for countries to replicate the Brazilian model, but can REDD+ be one of the means to stimulate countries to bend this curve? And what I mean with bending the curve is, you've seen this curve where a number of countries go through an economic development path where deforestation rates increase proportionally and then decrease as they develop economically. Ideally, we would not go through this bottom of the curve, but we would bend the curve to circumvent this high rate of deforestation as countries develop economically. As countries are starting to complete the readiness phase of REDD+, it is and becomes increasingly important to think about implementation of REDD+ at a subnational, but especially at national level. And as part of that, and perhaps this REDD+ cost curve could help, is to understand the most economically attractive means to implement REDD+, to inform countries about prioritizing some of these policies and measures they have in mind. Besides finding capital to implement REDD+, which is a challenge by itself, it's also important to understand the local context, the hurdles, land tenure, the opportunity cost on the ground, the political situation, whether a country is federally governed or has a very decentralized nature of regulation. Those are all issues that will definitely have a large impact on the effectiveness of REDD+, even if finance is available. Implementing REDD+ and district and national development plans may therefore prove to be crucial, in addition to providing results-based payments. So with this, I'm concluding my short presentation, and I'm ready if there are any questions or answers, and I'll try to answer them using the chat box. Thanks very much for listening.